Hello, welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name is Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. Great job surviving another week. I'm super proud of y'all. Everyone is doing such amazing work. And yeah, keep it up. Don't stop. Today on the show, I'm going to be answering some listener questions. We're going to get into a bunch of different topics, such as what to do with shame, and another question about helping a family member. And we're also going to talk about things like what to do when you get a case of the fuckets. So I'm really excited to try this new format for the show. And if you have any other listener questions, you can send them in at info@recoverydemystified.com. And as always, if you get anything out of this podcast, if it's helping you at all, there's a few things that you can do in the spirit of reciprocity to be able to help me out to continue to be able to do this. And a few of those things are you can share this episode with a friend, you can rate and review, and also there is a Patreon, and I added a little chat in there so we can have a Patreon community as well. So you can join the free version to talk in the chat, and then also if you join the paid version, the cheapest tier there is just $3 a month. And every little bit helps me continue to be able to make this show. So I appreciate y'all so much. I couldn't do it without you. And I also still have a couple of spots open right now for one-on-one coaching. So if that is something that you think would benefit you, like if you're interested in sending in a listener question, then maybe it would be helpful to have the accountability and the ear and wisdom of a recovery coach. So if you're interested in that, there's going to be a link down in the show notes to book a free 20-minute consultation with me and see if we're a good fit for each other. So I look forward to hearing from you. All right, let's get started. The first question I've got here says, I struggle with shame and I feel sort of like a degenerate for partying for 25 years. And I'm wondering if you feel the same way, and if so, how do you cope? Thank you for sending in this question. It is super relevant, and I definitely struggled with shame for a really long time. It was one of the things that prevented me from being able to heal, because at some point I had tried so hard to quit drinking for so long and failed over and over, that I decided that I was just a loser and I was just a bad person, and that my life was destined to be a tragedy because nothing else really made sense to me. And also I behaved badly and I hurt a lot of people. So I internalized and took the guilt from that and just decided that I just must be bad. So I definitely struggled with shame for a really long time. And I feel that that's like a really common thing. Addiction is so stigmatized in our society. So we get a lot of cultural messaging that just because we have an addiction, that we're bad, or that there's something like inherently wrong with us as human beings. So what I did to move through the shame, I guess I did a lot of different stuff, but I think it's important to recognize that the shame it's not an inherent characteristic of who we are. It's a thought and a feeling that we're experiencing, and it doesn't define us. And as we name the shame and we step back from it and we put ourselves in the role of the viewer, we can, again, like stop that neurological feedback loop that's created when we feed into things that are harming us. So just naming it, being like, okay, I am experiencing shame and I know this is not a part of me. And I feel like the shame is one of those things that's really directly tied to that addicted voice that I talk about all the time, which is the part of our brain, the weird ancient lizard part of our brain that our addiction lives in, that creates thoughts that try to get us to continue to use. And definitely feeling unworthy and ashamed is a thing that's going to prompt us to continue to use substances because we feel like we don't deserve a better life. So naming it, stepping back from it, and acknowledging that it's one of those thoughts that the addicted voice creates to keep us stuck, I think are really important first steps. And then what I personally did to unlearn the shame in my own life, and it was completely essential for me to be able to be in long-term recovery, was to get rid of the shame. Because when I felt like I didn't deserve anything good in life, and when I felt like I was inherently a bad person, I wasn't making choices to heal myself. I was just saying, well, I'm stuck like this, so I might as well just keep drinking. So what I did was I definitely took time to acknowledge the harms that I had caused and do some therapy and some self-healing work towards getting to a point where I wasn't going to ever cause those harms again. It's so easy to get stuck in the past and think about all of the bad things that we did, and it's important to reflect on them, but getting stuck with them and beginning to identify with them as parts of ourselves that are just really tethered in is going to be something that prevents us from growing and changing. So I acknowledged the harm, and then I worked to get to a place mentally through therapy, self-help books, podcasts, things of that nature, to get to a point where I am reasonably confident that I'm not going to cause those types of harms again. And outside of the shame that's related to causing harm in our addiction, there's that cultural conditioning and that stigmatization that we are just inherently bad for having an addiction. And how I moved through that personally was, I know I say all the time, making choices that someone who loves themselves would make. And I did read that in a book that I forgot what it was a million years ago. So if somebody, I'm not trying to steal somebody's freaking intellectual property. So if that phrase, if someone knows where that comes from, please tell me what book that comes from so I can start to cite it. But it stuck with me so deeply, what would someone who loves themselves do? And even if it felt impossible, even if it felt like getting out of bed, going for a walk, drinking water, eating food, just being stuck at these critical junctures of action or inaction, I would ask myself over and over and over, what would someone who loves themselves do in this situation? And they wouldn't spiral out in thoughts of shame. They wouldn't go out and drink again in the morning. A person who loves himself would go on a walk with the dogs. A person who loves himself would eat freaking breakfast and drink a glass of water, And it really did feel like fake it till you make it. But eventually taking those actions, those healthy life-serving actions, resulted in, fucking biochemical changes in my body because I was treating myself well. And then my thought patterns started to heal as a result. And I started to have small moments of pride, oh, I did this thing that made me feel good. And I can stand and look back at it and be okay, yeah, I did that. And doing all of that stuff is what got me to be able to crawl out of the hole of shame. So basically it was acknowledging and naming the shame and stepping back from it, realizing it's related to the addicted voice, realizing that it is the addicted voice keeping me stuck, then reflecting on harms that I've caused and trying to work towards healing those mental issues with myself to get to a place where I reasonably believe that I am so unlikely to ever cause those harms ever again, and then making just everyday choices to behave in a way that someone who loves himself would. And eventually the culmination of all of that stuff shifted, and I don't feel shame anymore. I genuinely, honestly, with every cell in my body, love myself. So I guess that is what I would say about unlearning shame. The next question that I have is about supporting a family member. And this person wrote in and said that they have a son who's in his 30s and that he has had an addiction at least since college. And this is a parent of the person, and that she is wondering how much help is too much. Right now, she's helping with the basics of shelter, food, and utilities because she can't bear to think of him as homeless or hungry, which that totally makes sense as a parent. She also is encouraging recovery without nagging. And she put in a side note, he would probably disagree that I don't nag. And then her question is the financial assistance harming more than helping? Is my assistance allowing him to avoid confronting what he needs to do, further delaying and preventing recovery? So I guess with that one, it's always so hard to give people advice about dealing with a family member in addiction because every situation is so very different from each other situation, and it's really emotional. It's so hard to see someone you love suffering, and I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine how hard it is to watch a kid, like your own child, suffering with an addiction, and it just sounds like such a really hard and painful place to be in, and there's no one choice that is 100% correct. Like every choice is going to be hard. What I really lean on is the work of Amber Hollingsworth in this case, and I had her on the show last fall, and she has a really great YouTube channel called Put the Shovel Down, but she does a lot of work about talking with how to support family members in addiction, and it's grounded in compassion and empathy, and it's also fucking practical, because sometimes compassion and empathy feels like protecting a person from the consequences of their addiction, and it's not compassionate. But what she says, it sounds counterintuitive at first, but it really resonates and makes a lot of sense for me. Basically, our addiction causes consequences, right? So if a loved one is preventing those consequences from occurring, then that in theory is going to slow down the person's motivation to access recovery. So I think in this specific case with this person who wrote in, it is so hard. What a heartbreaking choice to decide to not provide, shelter or food or whatever to your adult child. But also, so what Amber Hollingsworth says, she says to allow the consequences of the addiction to come from the universe, because they're going to happen, and allow that person to come to the conclusion on their own that they would like to seek healing from their addiction. And in the meantime, be preparing yourself with what are the resources if this person wants to seek inpatient treatment? What are the resources if this person wants to go to a support group? What are the resources if this person, wants books or a podcast or something else to work on healing from their addiction? And gather up all of the resources that they might potentially need. And then when they come to you and they're ready to approach someone about seeking a path to healing, then you'll be super prepared and ready to give them the resources that you've gotten ready for them. And when this person that wrote in this question is talking about gently nudging, but it might feel like nagging. What Amber Hollingsworth talks about is putting yourself in the role of the bad guy. And so when we're the person that provides that person's basic needs, and then we're also trying to encourage them to move towards a path of healing, oftentimes to a person in addiction, the person that's supporting them and holding the power and then asking them to address their addiction, in that person's head, the addicted voice is telling them that support person is the enemy or the bad guy, as Amber Hollingsworth says. So what she talks about a lot is just being loving and supportive and compassionate, but not accidentally getting yourself in the role of the bad guy, and then having all of the resources prepared for when that person is experiencing the consequences that naturally come as a result of addiction from the universe. And just being compassionate, open-minded, and loving, and ready to support them when they're ready to receive support. And in the meantime, taking care of your own self, filling up your own cup, and never letting go of that compassion, treating them like a normal, lovable human being, not enabling, but not stigmatizing either. And that's always a really hard spot to be in. So from the bottom of my heart, super deep compassion to the person that sent in that question, because it's really hard to have a front row seat to someone's addiction. And it totally makes sense to want to encourage them to heal or provide their basic needs for them. And I'm not saying anything is like right or wrong, but yeah, if we're preventing the natural consequences from the universe to present themselves to this person, and if they feel like they are being pressured or nagged, those things are going to delay their healing process, most likely. But yeah, always a really freaking hard spot to be, because we want to help people heal, and sometimes they're just not ready. So then the next question that I have is about the fuck it's, which I think is a really important topic. So this person writes, do you have advice to get over the hump to commit to sobriety again when it feels like it's so easy to keep drinking? To have the fuck it's. I had a couple drinks yesterday and might as well do it again tonight. Finding my start over point past inertia of a slippery slope of summer cocktails. Without the school year routine, self-help and spiritual growth take a back burner during the summer. All right, this one is really interesting and really common. So, I mean, people say like relapse is a part of recovery, and it is for the vast majority of people. So I think we need to find ways to address what we do after we go back out, because it can go a lot of different ways. And one really common way is what this listener was talking about, where you get a case of the fuck it's. And I think the first thing I would point back to is the fuck it's are the addicted voice. It's that lizard part of your brain, that ancient part of your brain where your addiction lives. And it's the part of your brain that gives you any thought of a desire to use. So again, my first step there would be like, okay, is this thought a result of the addicted voice? And the litmus test for that is, does this result in a desire to use? And I think that the fuck it's are just an absolutely extremely strong desire to use. So I would name it. I would say, this is a thought of the addicted voice, and then move back to what would someone who loves themselves do. And in that case, it would be not spin out and get the fuck it's. And it's really common, drawing it back to that shame thing, to after we go back out, or as Paul Churchill says, do field research or test the waters, or you can call it a relapse if you'd like. But a lot of people feel fucking ashamed. They feel bad. They feel like they've failed. They fucked up. You know, all of our neurochemicals get a fucking emotional roller coaster after we add a substance back in again. So I would invite people to also recognize if there's shame coming up, if there's other emotions that are all wrapped up into it, and give those a name and step back from them and view them from the outside. Step back and say, okay, this idea to spiral out and say fuck it and just go back to drinking again is the addicted voice. There's no inherent moral value to whether or not you use substances again. There's moral value to, like, if you hurt somebody while you were using again, or if you're not living up to your own, personal code of ethics with your actions while you were using again. But just the mere fact of like having a fucking drink at the party, or like, having beers at home by yourself one time, like there is no inherent moral value. Like, using drugs and drinking alcohol is not evil. Like, it is not inherently a thing that we need to judge ourselves for. But the shame is going to be another thing that the addicted voice uses to try to keep us stuck. So I would just catch that addicted voice like a game of whack-a-mole, because as soon as you're like, okay, well, saying fuck it is the addicted voice, then it's going to come back up and be like guilt and shame. And you can be like, well, I see that too, and I recognize it, and I'm giving it a name. And then as soon as you do that, perhaps another thought is going to come up, because the addicted voice really likes to latch on to when we go back out and test the waters again. And something that really frustrates me about the common, like the 12-step coded language of recovery culture is people think that if you go back out and use again after a period of abstinence, that you're going back to day one, that you're like starting over, and that all that work that you did just disappears. And that's reinforced by 12-step programming, making people go back and get a 24-hour chip every time that they go back out and use. And I'm here to tell you that all of the work that you did and all of the healing and learning and personal growth that you did during a period of abstinence does not go away when you use again. And your addicted voice and cultural conditioning will try to tell you that it does go away. but all of those things that you learned are still with you. And the new habits that you are forming are going to be so much easier to shift back and plug into after a time of going back out, because those body memories still live inside you and you can still turn back towards them. But yeah, I would just say that, and especially like a lot of times summertime like is a big trigger because there's a lot more hanging out, a lot more partying, a lot more like public drinking, and it makes sense to like have slip ups during this time of year. So I would just say recognize when that addicted voice is pushing at us, recognize when that addicted voice is being more persistent, and working towards not buying into the guilt and shame that oftentimes comes with using again, because there is no inherent moral value to using substances. It is not an evil thing to do. So yeah, I would just name it. I would name it and say, I'm experiencing the fuck it's. I'm experiencing a craving. I'm experiencing thoughts of the addicted voice, and there's no inherent moral value to this, and I have the ability to pivot and choose something else. So yeah, really great question, really common thing that people go through, and I'm really appreciative that the listener sent this in. All right, and then the next question I got is, with all of the pathways and modalities and definitions of recovery, are there characteristics that most people thriving in their recovery have in common? I love this because it is bringing the definition of recovery to more than just an abstinence of substance use, and it brings it back to thriving. And it took me a while to learn what that looks like in my recovery. But when I see people thriving in their recovery, what I see is people who have combed over every facet of their life and eliminated things that were emotionally draining them and focus on things that genuinely make them feel good. So it's this attunement to our intuition and our own personality and understanding what works for us, and when we're doing things that are self-serving and when we are doing things just to please other people or like have a facade and worrying about other people's judgment. So when I see people just absolutely thriving in their recovery, they've really connected back to authenticity, I think is what it all comes down to. There is so much extra stress and drains in our life that we can let go of once we start to recognize them. Things that we're doing that don't bring us joy, things that we're doing that empty our cup, that are completely unnecessary, letting go of those things and then reconnecting to things that like genuinely make our life feel full and meaningful. And a lot of it has to do with the people that we keep around us and whether or not they are draining or uplifting us. I think that people that are thriving in recovery are creating those authentic connections and recognizing when something is a drain or when it's something that builds them up. And it's so much more than just not drinking or not using drugs. Yeah, I think it's just really, really, really based on that connection to authenticity that a lot of us lose. Like, there's so much cultural messaging that leads us to do like approval seeking from other people. And I want to just point out that there's nothing wrong with you if you're doing approval seeking behaviors. Like, it's also really natural and normal to want connections in those ways. But the stress that it puts on us to constantly be trying to please other people or work to make other people feel more comfortable is something that's going to be like so freaking depleting for us. And when we are really depleted, we are not thriving in our recovery, and it leads us to more vulnerable places where that addicted voice can sneak in and start to poke and prod us in ways that are dangerous and not helpful for our recovery. But yeah, I think that it's like a global change. It's a change within every part of our lives, people that are absolutely thriving in recovery, I think, are just really connected to their own authenticity. So I really appreciate that question for that reason. I think that recovery is so complex. All right, the next question is, how do I not take a drink when I am feeling emotional pain? And I think that is a time where the addicted voice is very loud and very sneaky. When we're in emotional pain, it's oftentimes also physical pain, and it can feel like something we just want to make go away. And that makes sense because pain is a really difficult thing to deal with. What I talk about a lot is learning how to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. There's this false notion that there are good feelings and bad feelings, and we're doing something wrong if we have bad feelings, and we should do everything in our life to only feel good. But my invitation is to be appreciative of the complexity and diversity of human emotions and honor them all as like just a beautiful experience of being alive on this earth. And that's not to say that like fucking anxiety or emotional pain or grief or sadness or anger, any of that stuff like is comfortable. It sucks often at times, but learning how to sit with it and process it in healthy ways and let it flow through. One of my favorite things to do when I'm feeling uncomfortable or emotional or have emotional pain is I tell myself, you won't feel this way forever, because all emotions, all feelings are temporary. And it's just like absolutely true. Whether it's a pleasant emotion or a difficult one, I tell myself, you won't feel this way forever. And I find a lot of comfort in that. But yeah, I guess sort of a common theme with difficult thoughts, triggering thoughts. I step back and I recognize them as the addicted voice, that ancient part of the brain where the addiction lives, and that is going to create any and all thoughts possible to try to get a person to drink. So I feel like that's a really important first step in every one of these situations, just being like, is this or is this not the addicted voice? And if a person is experiencing a painful emotion and they're having a thought of drinking or using, pretty clear cut, that's the addicted voice in that case. So viewing it, separating from it, taking that moment to respond instead of react, I think is really important. And then after that, using one of our emotional tools to move through the emotion instead of trying to suppress it. In our addiction, it's so common to not be able to tolerate discomfort and to try to suppress it at every turn. So it is going to be like a brand new experience, like a brand new we're all little babies out here in the world, just like having new experiences and learning how to tolerate and survive through them. So yeah, I guess that is the basics of what I would do. I would like name it and honor it and be like, okay, I'm experiencing a painful emotion. And then whatever that painful emotion may be, giving a name to it. And then be like, and also my addicted voice is responding to my painful emotion by offering to me to take a drink. And I can step back from both of those two things and make a different choice. And for me personally, if I was having a painful emotion, I would try to figure out how to sit with it and watch it happen and live through it and treat myself gently with compassion and love and make a choice where I can tolerate that emotion and survive it and honor it, because there's so much complexity to being human, and to try to shut off one emotion or the other because it's unpleasant is not skillful, and it's ultimately going to lead to more emotional suppression. And when we suppress emotions, they don't go away. They get stuck and they come back up at inopportune times. So yeah, the process there, just be honoring it and accepting it and letting it flow and understanding that I won't feel this way forever. So thank you for whoever wrote in with that question. All right. And then the last question that I have for today is, in considering how my relationships with substances and intoxication are inextricably linked to self-harm, control, and the expression of agency through both harm and willful relinquishing of control, as well as reward. Do you think that kink could be or is a useful modality for healing toxic relationships with substances? This one, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I've never even considered that. But my first thought is like, yes, any relationship to learning trust with yourself and to listening to your intuition, listening to your body, and listening to your own personal reaction to stimuli is gonna be an important part of a healing process. I really like how this listener related the different overlaps of kink and control and relinquishing of control to use of substances. And one of the like really important things about kink is that like you're in a vulnerable position, but it's on purpose and you are in control. And I think that that could be like a really important and like meaningful way to heal from addiction, which is like a place that we put ourselves oftentimes, and we think we would like to be in control of it, but time and time again, our own scientific data on ourselves has proven that it puts us in a position of exactly the opposite of that, of trying to feel safe and in control, and then over and over we feel unsafe and out of control. And that impulse to like be in a place of emotional intensity and riskiness, I think that doing kink practices could be like a really, really cool way to engage with the danger that's overlapping with the use of substances, but in a way where we are learning to trust ourselves and we're participating in an act of empowerment and exploring all of those different mental avenues throughout our mind in a way where we do actually have agency over ourselves instead of over and over trying to use substances and reaching in a dark cave to try to like find these places where we can control ourselves, still having experiences of risk and pain and harm, but in all of these scary negative ways. I think it's a really cool idea and a really cool thought to participate in kink practices as a way to still be in a place of like vulnerability and relative pain, but experience clear empowerment and trust, and be in a place where we're learning about the sensations of our body and the thoughts in our mind, where we do actually have control over something. So yeah, very, very interesting question, and something that I've never heard before. But recovery can look like so many different things for so many people. And in my opinion, if we are engaging with our own authenticity, our own creativity, working towards having compassion for ourselves, doing practices that grow our empowerment and grow our self-trust and our self-love, that anything that's in alignment with that, like, hell yeah. And if doing a kink practice is in alignment for you and it helps you towards your own empowerment and self-growth, then fucking do it, you know? Yeah, so I guess that's all for today for the listener questions. I would be so stoked to be able to do this as a regular thing. So if you have any listener questions, you can go ahead and send them to me, info@recoverydemystified.com. And yeah, I look forward to speaking with y'all soon. You're doing amazing work. Don't stop. I believe in you. You're a fucking badass. Keep it up. All right, my friends. May you be happy and free. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Demystified. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend or rate and review us so we can reach a larger audience. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our beautiful theme music is by Logan Bragg. And our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. We are entirely supported by your generous donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can find a link to donate in the description. May you be happy and free, dear listener.